Throughout the ages, history has been altered by word of mouth and the misrepresentation of those who might not have been present when some of the world's most significant events took place. Channelers Barry and Connie Strohm bring through the spirits of those who actually witnessed or took part in these historical events and lets them tell their stories in their own words. Welcome to Channeling History. And now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Channeling History. We're the only show where we speak to the souls that are on the other side. All of our guests have passed on this show, and we're brought to you on the Parax Radio Network. I'm Barry Strohm, your host, and I will be doing the channeling tonight.
And we would like to thank you for tuning into our show this evening. Tonight, we will be interviewing two famous sports personalities, Muhammad Ali and Lou Gehrig. Ali was one of the greatest boxers of all times, converted to Islam at the age of 22, and refused to be drafted during the Vietnam War. He was convicted for draft evasion and could not fight for 4 years during his prime years. His conviction was overturned by the Supreme Court, and he continued his fighting career. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's syndrome in 1984 and suffered from the illness for many years. Lou Gehrig was one of the greatest baseball players of all time. He set the record for consecutive games played, 2,130, that lasted for 50 years until Cal Ripken Jr. broke the record. In 1939, he was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS, which took his life at the height of his career. ALS became known as the Lou Gehrig disease. Please tell your friends about it so we can continue to grow our audience.
Okay, we always try to give a small disclaimer when we start because we have no idea what our guests are going to say. And I was chatting with Muhammad Ali a little before the show. If anybody ever followed his story, you know that he was not bashful about speaking. So we may need it tonight. Anyway, the opinions or statements voiced on our show are the channeled words of the spirits and do not necessarily reflect our opinions, those of the Parax Network, or of our sponsors. All of our shows are available on our YouTube channel. It's in my name, Barry Strohm. If you'd like to download them, go to Podomatic.com and just search Channeling History. We can also be heard on a bunch of other platforms such as Spotify, Audible, Pandora, iTunes. We're many, many different places.
So as always, we welcome your questions tonight through the chat room. While we do have questions prepared for our guests, we welcome your participation and look forward to your questions.
Now, when we begin the channel tonight, as usual, Connie will ask the questions, and I will speak the answers in the words of the spirits. And before we channel, we always say a prayer of protection. So, Connie, let's say the prayer, and we will begin to channel with the famous Muhammad Ali.
God, please grant us your wisdom and protection. Grant us the knowledge that we can handle and keep us safe from all things that will harm us. Keep the messages positive and pure love. Keep us safe from our egos. We ask these things in the light of the seen, the unseen, and the honesty of God. Amen.
Okay, Connie, I'm looking forward to this one tonight, so let's start speaking with our spirit guests.
I suspect you're not the only one looking forward to it. Muhammad, thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to begin with a message?
Oh, absolutely. Do you really think I would pass up this opportunity?
No, not really.
I would like to thank you for allowing me to come through. There were many things I did in my life that were a little questionable, but I was never bashful. I tried to always be true to my convictions, and quite often my convictions would get me in trouble. I hope that I did act as a mentor to many of the young blacks of the time, and I hope that there are still some out there that pay attention. I was raised in a very difficult time. There was a lot of animosity towards me because of the color of my skin. There was a lot of animosity towards me because of my talent. Many people couldn't accept the fact that a black man would have the talent that I had. So I know that you have a bunch of questions. So why don't we get started?
Okay, you were born Cassius Marcellius Clay Jr. You're named after your father. So will you tell us about your parents?
My parents, my mother was a very strong person. She tried to raise me in the church. My father had an alcohol problem, some trouble keeping jobs. My mother had a lot of the responsibilities. We were poor. We didn't have a lot of money. We were black I was black growing up in Kentucky. It was a time where we were still not accepted in many places. It was a childhood where you had to learn to protect yourself. And I was very lucky to have mentors. I had people that taught me to box. I had athletic abilities. I wouldn't say that I had an easy childhood, but when you're big for your age and strong and able to box, you can get along.
I believe that. Okay, so you were born in Kentucky and you began training as an amateur boxer at 12. Why did you want to become a boxer?
Well, it's an interesting story. Somebody stole my bicycle when I was 12 years old, and it really upset me. I wanted to go and get revenge, and I wanted to beat up the people that took my bike. A fine gentleman, a person that I grew to respect and love, told me very clearly. He said, "Son, if you're going to go pick a fight, you better know how to fight. So why don't you let me teach you?" And this gentleman took time to give me my first boxing lessons. I instantly loved it. I wanted to be able to earn money for my family. I wanted to be able to protect myself. And I wanted people to know who I was. So really, that's how I became with boxing. I guess I almost said a cuss word. I guess if that individual had not stolen my bike, I'm not sure where I would have wound up.
It could be that was part of your life plan. At the age of 22, you denounced your birth name and became a member of the Muslim faith, taking on the name Muhammad Ali. Why did you decide to become a Muslim?
I was mistreated as a black person. We were not allowed to eat in the same restaurants as a white person was allowed. One time I tried to simply go in to get a drink of water, and they wouldn't even give me a drink of water because I was black. I became very alienated towards white people. I thought that they were the enemy of the black people. I felt that the religion that my mother had introduced me to was not a religion that would allow me to strive to succeed as a black person. Keep in mind, in those days, the black people sat in the back of the church. I followed the teachings of Elijah Muhammad. I heard him, I listened to him, and yes, he was a black supremacist, and he spoke of many things that I grew to know were not right. But I thought that the teachings of the Muslim faith was a faith in which black people could grow and strengthen. The Nation of Islam was what I joined. There were no white people allowed in the Nation of Islam. There were many whites that were very much opposed to that group. And I must admit that many of their teachings were not in line with the Muslim faith. I want all of you out there to understand that the Muslim faith is a faith of peace and charity. There are many people, many members of the Islam faith that do not accept many of the teachings. There are individuals that believe in jihad. There are many individuals in the Islam faith that are quite violent. I made mistakes in the beginning of my choices. I felt that my name, Cassius Clay, was a name that would be given to a slave. There were many slaves in my family background. I resented what white people had done to us. I resented what white people had done to the black community. I resented the fact that the white people had limited the opportunities for blacks. I resented the fact that white people had restricted the opportunity for blacks to learn a good education and to be treated equally. I grew up at a time where Martin Luther King and many others were preaching nonviolence as a way of gaining equality. I did not agree with them. I felt that at that time that for blacks to advance and gain equality, they needed to be very strong. I also mistakenly felt that violence was not out of the question to be used to gain equality. I guess that's kind of a long answer to your question, Connie.
Well, that's okay. You just answered two questions in one. So I take it that is the reason, then, that you did not go to the classic Islam religion.
I didn't really have a chance to study the classic Islam religion. The Nation of Islam was what attracted my attention, and that was what I felt would offer me the best opportunity. They did teach many things that were not accepted in the basic Islamic faith. In those days, any person that was gay would be persecuted in Islam. The Islam faith was very anti-Semitic, but they did not have the basic dislike of white people that the Nation of Islam had. At that time in my life, I just simply felt that the Nation of Islam offered me the best opportunities to grow and to mature.
Okay, in 1964, you married your first wife, Sanji, but you divorced after only a year. What happened with that marriage?
She refused to adopt the living style the clothing and the mannerisms that were required by the Nation of Islam. She was a beautiful and outgoing person. She wanted to be able to dress, to do the things that a young person would do in those days. She absolutely refused to join that type of a religion that forced her to live in a way that she did not want to live. I was sold that Nation of Islam was the best that I could do at the time. So we got a divorce, and I've truly regretted the fact, because I think that she could have truly been the love of my life.
Okay, in 1966, you refused to be drafted into the military owing to your religious beliefs and ethical opposition to the Vietnam War. Did you always have these beliefs, or were your actions the result of the teachings of the Nation of Islam?
I always thought that Vietnam was a white man's war. All of the negativities from my youth helped lead me to the belief that I did not want to go into the Army. Keeping in mind in those days where blacks were mistreated in the Army and had little opportunities for advancement. It was a combination of things, but I did truly believe that I did not want to fight in the Vietnam War. So I did resist the draft.
Okay, so you were arrested for draft evasion and stripped of your boxing titles. You lost nearly 4 years during your prime fighting age because of your actions as your court challenge took place. Why did you not just simply join and take conscientious objector status and serve 2 years and move on?
I tried to take conscientious objection status, but the white officers would not allow it. They're the ones that challenged it and said that I would go into the Army. When I simply refused, it was those officers that ordered the court-martial, and I was convicted of those charges.
Why did the government oppose your conscientious status?
I think it was a combination of the fact that I was a member of the Nation of Islam. It was a fact that blacks were expected to serve in the Army. I hate to say it, but I think it was a fact that the white officers needed cannon fodder, and blacks were very convenient for that purpose. I feel that I should have been given that status, but I believe that it was the opposition of the white officers that caused me all my problems.
So those were the reasons that you opposed the Vietnam War. Were there anything else that bothered you about it?
I thought it was an unjust war. I thought we had no business going over there. We had just fought in Korea. World War II was not that far behind us. I did not believe that our government was doing the right thing. So I did have many reasons for trying to not serve and not fight in that war.
Yeah. What was your basic opinion of America at that point?
I thought that America was a place of opportunity for black people, but that the attitude of white people had to change for that to take place. I was not opposed to America. I thought it was a great country. I grew up in it. I did not have much education. I did not know much of the history of the country. But I did know that America was the best country in the world. I just simply did not feel that they were on the right track with this war.
Okay. In a speech to college students during your exile from boxing, you stated that your enemy is the white people, not the Viet Cong. Did you always feel that white people were your enemy?
Growing up, and many times I did feel that white people were my enemy. I had to rely on tutorship from the black community. As I said, in those days, Kentucky was a very difficult place for blacks. I was very bitter at that point in that speech. I felt that it was white people that had forced me to the point that I could not fight. So, yes, at that time in my life, I was extremely bitter towards white people.
Understandable. Did you understand the consequences of your actions when you refused the military service?
I did not fully understand how far the white officers would take the actions against me. I felt that I would be given conscientious objector status. When they slammed that door for me, I realized that things were going to be a lot worse than I ever thought they would be.
Okay, why did you change from Nation of Islam to become a follower of the Sunni Islam?
I realized that the Nation of Islam had many teachings that were not true to the Islamic faith. In the time that I didn't fight, I had time to study, I had time to try to learn the different aspects of the Islamic faith. I had great belief that Islam was an answer that would allow black people to advance, because there were many black countries in which Islam was the main religion. I started to understand truly that the Nation of Islam was much different from the classic Islamic faith. And I wanted to stay with that faith. So that was why I switched to becoming a follower of Sunni Islam.
Have you seen the spirit of Prophet Muhammad now that you're on the other side?
Yes, I have. I've seen him multiple times. We have talked. He pointed out that I had made mistakes early in my career with the faith. He told me that he was happy that I had switched, that I had become much less militant, that I had become more interested in serving Allah than in serving myself as my life progressed. He is a wonderful, wonderful spirit. I know that you have talked to him, and I know that you are bringing his messages. I hope that the people take time to listen. They will be truly well served if they do.
We wish the same. Muhammad, what do you consider the greatest mistake you made in your life?
I made several that I wish I had back. I wish I had not divorced my first wife. I think that she could have had been a great partner throughout my life. And she was giving me advice not to follow the teachings of Nation of Islam and the Black Power movement at the time. I think if I had followed her advice, I would not have had as many problems getting conscientious objector status in the military. I think that joining Nation of Islam was a major mistake, and probably the greatest mistake, because it had longer lasting problems as I became older.
What is your opinion of race relations in the United States today?
Race relations have definitely improved since my time of my youth. Martin Luther King had a great impact on the black community. Much has been accomplished. You've had a black president. There are truly many people today that do not see color. There are still many people taking advantage of the black community, at least in many of the large cities. I see that the youth are still abused educationally. Many of the black youth do not have the opportunity to gain an education, to gain a vocation that will let them get a job. Many of the black youth are forced to remain in poverty. While there is still a glass ceiling in many respects, many of the bright, brilliant young black individuals have gained employment and are doing incredible jobs in research. The black mind is the same as the white mind when it is treated equally with an education. There is still much to be done, but if the black community worked in cooperation with the white community, I think we are within several generations of true equality.
I truly hope that comes true. You became diagnosed with Parkinson's syndrome in 1984. Do you think the violent blows to your head had anything to do with your Parkinson's disease?
I do believe it was a contributing factor to Parkinson's, but the Parkinson's was also part of my life plan. I wanted to become, when they made up my life plan on the other side, I was to have fame, and then I was to be able to influence others into how I treated myself as I was suffering with this terrible disease. I tried to set a good example. I knew how Parkinson's was going to devastate my body. It helped me turn to helping others. I hope that I faced my illness with bravery. I hope that I showed people that it was something that could be used to the advantage of others. I tried to set a good example. Much of the militancy of my youth was gone by the time that I received diagnosis of Parkinson's. I was at a point in my life there at that time that I really wanted to help others. And I hope that I succeeded somewhat in doing it.
I believe you did. So you were actually quite active in philanthropy and humanitarianism. Could you tell us about some of these activities?
I tried to help the downtrodden blacks in poor communities. I tried to work with the United Nations, although I had mixed results there. I tried to go to African countries and help their communities become self-sufficient. I did contribute money to organizations. As I became older, I truly realized that the great happiness in life is helping others. I wish that I had started earlier. I wish that I had done a better job. I guess everyone feels that they can do a better job with their life.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mohammed. It's been a very good message. Okay, what do you think when you hear people refer to you as possibly the greatest fighter of all time?
I would ask why they say possibly. I feel that I was the greatest fighter of all time. But then again, I'm a very modest person.
I'll agree with you on that. Okay, do you have a final message for us?
Yes, I would like to thank you for allowing me to come through and speak tonight. When you're on this side, there's no color. The soul has no race. The soul has no language. The soul is, when you're in heaven, you are in the area of the great equalizer. God does not see differences in individuals. God sees everyone being alike. I was very militant in my youth because I resented what white people did to people of color. I feel that it is now time that everyone cooperates, shows love towards one another. It's a time for people to truly be colorblind. You will find that the intellectual capacity of individuals, regardless of color, is the same. A black person can accomplish anything that a white person can accomplish. A brown person. You're all alike. It has taken generations to understand that fact. But it is a true fact. And trust me, when you return home, you will truly understand that. Well, thank you, Mohammed. We really appreciate it. Connie, we're running behind. Let's skip the break and go on to Mr. Gehrig.
Okay. Lou, thank you for joining us this evening. You also have a great story. Would you like to begin with a message?
I would like to thank you for allowing me to come through as well. I was incredibly blessed throughout my life. I tried to do my best to help others. I tried to live a life that God expected of me. I was incredibly blessed. I was able to hit a baseball out of the park. Many people cannot do that. But there are many people that can live a life that is far better than hitting a baseball out of the park. I always tried to help others as best I could. I would hope that anybody listening to these messages would understand the truth in what you hear. I was very successful. I was given a gift by God. God allowed me and blessed me to be very successful at playing a game. I want all of you to understand that life is a game. And all of you can, shall we say, hit the ball out of the park in your lives. Show love to others, help others, do charity. Do all of the things that will truly bring you great joy. And you will all join me in hitting the ball out of the park. So thank you. Thank you for allowing me to come through. And Connie, I know you also have questions for me.
I do, and you definitely got us off to a great start. Will you tell us about your parents?
My mother was a very, very strong person. In some ways, she was too strong. I know she felt that there was no woman suitable for her son. And yes, I did live at home until I was almost 30 years old, but I did find the love of my life. My mother instilled very strict morals in me. She told me that if I followed the will of God, that I would go to heaven. Well, she taught me what she thought were the accurate teachings of God. But what was important, even though all of her teachings were not correct, the basic concept of leading a good life, of helping others, that was really the most important thing that I did. So my mother played a very strong role. My father, not so much. But I think that she succeeded. And when I returned home, I found that I had truly lived up to the expectations of our Lord.
And that explains why you were successful as a person of high moral character, living in a not very moral times. So we have your mom to thank for that, right?
That is correct.
Okay, why did you decide to attend Columbia University?
I was a very good athlete. My mother encouraged me to play sports. I wasn't really that good of a scholar, but I could do things at a very early age that the other kids could not do. Columbia wanted me to attend. They actually wanted me to play football because I was of solid stature and fairly big. They also wanted me to play baseball. I found that football was not something I really enjoyed, but I loved playing ball. And I had a very good offer to go to Columbia. So that was really where I got my foundation. I was not the best student, but I was the best player on the baseball team.
Okay. You made your major league debut with the New York Yankees in 1923. What was it like playing professional baseball in the 20s and 30s?
Professional baseball was huge in the 20s and 30s. The men had returned from World War I. They were looking for entertainment and enjoyment. Baseball was probably as popular during those years as any other sport. During the 20s, prosperity, everything was wonderful. The economy was roaring. And then along came the Depression, the Great Depression of the 30s. Radio was making baseball available to anyone that wanted to listen. I think in many instances, baseball created an emotional diversion for the people that were suffering so badly. They could turn on a radio and they would be able to forget their problems for a couple hours. It was also a time of players of incredible talent. Babe Ruth, I had the honor of playing with him for all those years. There were so many really good talents in those days. I think the combination of the economic times, the talent level, it was a time of incredible interest. And I was so lucky to have been chosen to be able to play in those days.
Do you consider baseball talent any better today than it was when you played?
No, we had some great talent. I mean, I mentioned the Babe. Today you see these kids, they start at a very early age. They have trainers at 12 years old. The parents give them everything. They are physically trained to play ball. In my day, physical training was not exactly what it is now. It was not uncommon for players to show up half drunk or totally drunk for a ball game. Physical fitness, lifting a beer bottle was often the biggest workout. The men I played with had incredible talent. God gave them incredible gifts. Today, there are players that have incredible gifts as well. But I think that if you gave the players of my time the same physical training, that they would be able to outperform many of the players today.
Okay. Okay, you mentioned that you lived with your mother until you were 30 years old, and then you met your wife, Eleanor. Would you tell us about her?
Eleanor was the love of my life. She was an incredible person. We're together over here. We're still as much in love on this side as we were on your side. When I became ill, and it was a shock for her, she did everything in her power to make my final days as comfortable as possible. She is the personification of love, the personification of faith. And after my passing, she worked tirelessly to raise money for research for ALS. In my day, that was not a common illness. She lived a wonderful life, and I was so blessed by God to have met her.
Okay, you mentioned you played with Babe Ruth. What was it like playing with him?
Babe was a true piece of work. He loved to party. Physical conditioning was pretty much not in his vocabulary. The Babe had unbelievable talent. He batted number 3 in the Yankees order, and I batted number 4. It was one of the most powerful batting lineups, I think, ever to play baseball. Imagine being a pitcher, having Babe Ruth coming up as the number 3 batter. And my batting averages were in the high 300s in those days. If you walked to Babe, you had to face me. That forced those pitchers to pitch to Babe, and he would reward them by knocking their balls out of the park. It was an incredible time for professional baseball.
It was indeed. You were known as the Iron Man. You played in 2,130 consecutive games before the players wore safety equipment, such as batting helmets. To what do you attribute the inner strength required to set such a record?
I was determined to be my best. I felt that if I succumbed to injuries, that I would not be living up to my true potentials. I wanted to set an example. I wanted to show the youth that if you had determination, if you had guts, if you had your mind made up that nothing would stop you, that you would be able to succeed. I played through broken bones. I played through being knocked unconscious with balls. I played until ALS forced me to stop. But it's determination. Any young person, I hope, that is listening to this show can still use my determination. I was actually pleased when Ripken set a new endurance record. He is also a wonderful individual, and he helps the young. I was trying to do what I could to set a great example.
Okay, in 1939, you were diagnosed with the ALS. What were your first thoughts when you heard that diagnosis?
I had been losing strength for a short period of time. I knew something was wrong. I never thought that it would be something so debilitating and deadly as ALS. When I first heard it, I said, "Why me, God? Why would you let something like this happen to me?" Once the idea sunk in that I would be having a limited lifetime, I decided that I would make the absolute most of that. I would continue to be the best example that I could be. People looked at me and pitied me. I wanted them to believe that what was taking place was a blessing. I had lived an incredible life, and now I had the opportunity to finish my life by being a great example to others that were suffering. So yes, in the beginning it did throw me. But as I prayed to God, I received the inspiration that I needed to make the most of the time that I had remaining.
And you certainly succeeded. Was ALS part of your life plan?
Yes, when I returned home, I found out that ALS was truly part of the life plan that I had prepared. ALS was intended to be the final culmination of the example that I could set in life.
So that was the purpose of you having to suffer like that, to set an example for others.
Yes, and it was a very difficult illness. My mind remained sharp right up until the time of my passing, but my body would not move. What could be worse for such an athlete?
That's for sure. What level are you in the realms of heaven?
I am in the upper sixth level. I have served God in many ways, and I was rewarded for how I lived this lifetime as Lou Gehrig. I can assure everyone that it is well worth your while to serve God and follow his commandments. Heaven is a wonderful place.
We've heard that a time or two before. It must be true. You played football at Columbia before there were helmets and pads. You suffered multiple concussions throughout your life. Did these concussions play any role in your suffering of ALS?
No, I think that concussions can play a role in illnesses such as dementia, Parkinson's, that type of illness. But ALS was a separate part of my life plan, and how I lived my life had nothing to do with it.
Okay, as you mentioned, in ALS, your mind still remains fully aware right until the end. So, what were your thoughts as you approached the very end of your physical life?
I wish that I could have done more. I know that I had great accomplishments. I knew that I had set as best an example as I was capable of. I tried to work and be around the young as long as I could. As I approached the end of my physical life, I actually looked forward to the time of my passing so that I could get out of my body. I was seeing angels and I was seeing family members, and they were telling me that it would soon be over and that all would be well. And I must admit, towards the end, I looked forward to it.
That is definitely understandable. Okay, in spite of what you were going through, did you ever lose your faith in God?
I never lost my true faith in God. But when I was diagnosed, I must say, God, why did you do this to me? Because I did not totally understand. God was always very close to me. I always knew that my physical abilities were a gift of God. I knew that I was sent back to do things other people could not do. So I did question his decisions, but I never lost faith.
Okay, what would you tell individuals that are suffering from debilitating or possibly fatal diseases now that you've gone through it?
I would tell them that they need to face those diseases with as much courage as possible. Quite often, such diseases are part of life plans. It can be a test in how you face such disease. I never truly realized that until I got to the other side. Everyone will face a time of passing. That's just not something that should be feared. Many people will suffer. They may have a cancer, they may have ALS as I did. They need to try to do God's will as long as possible. They need to try to use those diseases as a tool. They need to look at that disease as an opportunity to set a good example for others. How you face grief, how you face suffering, how you face debilitating diseases is all part of a test you have to pass. Just as I would not let injuries put me out of ball games, you cannot let suffering and diseases affect how you treat others.
So how were you greeted when you entered heaven?
I was greeted by the angels. I was greeted by my family members. My guides told me that I had done well. I had done minor things, as everyone does, but there was nothing in my judgment that interfered with the goal of what I had when I was sent back. I can tell you that it was really great when I was released of that physical body.
I am sure. Lou, what do you feel was your greatest accomplishment in life?
My greatest accomplishment in life was setting a good example for others. My statistics and baseball accomplishments were secondary. I always tried to help people. I always tried to do what I thought was right. I tried to show charity towards others. I tried to teach the young. And as I approached my time of passing, I tried to show the true strength that I had shown in life. Believe me, ALS is an incredible test of your will. When you are laying in that bed and your body will not move, but your mind is as sharp as it ever was, the things that go through your mind are beyond comprehension. You must remain strong, and you must do what God is asking you to do. But I think setting a good example is my greatest accomplishment.
Is there anything that you would change in your life as Lou Gehrig?
In truth, I wish that I had met my wife sooner. She was such a great example and companion. I guess if I had gone out from my mother's home, that I might have met her earlier. But then again, I might have met someone else that was not as great a companion. I really, as I look back, do not find much that I would change. I think the fact that my judgment was so wonderful is the fact that I did truly live up to what God expected of me.
It would certainly appear that way. Do you see a cure for ALS anytime soon?
There will be a cure sometime in the future. It will not happen immediately. Sadly, those that are diagnosed with the illness at this time, they may see drugs that will prolong life, but there is certainly no cure that will be available anytime soon. It will happen, but it will be to the benefit of future generations.
Are you considering the possibility of reincarnating anytime soon?
I've been discussing that with my guides, but I don't want to come back without my wife. So we have to discuss things over here. And when the time is right, I'm sure that we will return again together.
Good. As you watch from the other side, what is your opinion of what's taking place in professional sports today?
I think that money is ruining professional sports. We made a good living, but we were never extremely wealthy in our time. Today, players are more worried about wealth than they are about setting examples. I would hope that the professional players of today would step back. Now, there are many that do much. There are many that have their own charities. There are many that help children. I would hope that the professional players of today would use their great wealth to help others. If they do that, I can assure them that when they return, they will have done well.
Okay, Lou, thank you so much. It's been a great interview. Do you have a final message for us?
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I hope that my words tonight have set a good example for others as I tried to do in my life. It is a very difficult time. There's much suffering. There are many people of great wealth, and there are many people that have been left behind. God blesses certain individuals with great athletic abilities. I hope that those individuals will understand it's a blessing, and I hope that they will use those gifts to help others. Be a mentor to the young. The young are the key to the future. I thank you for allowing me to come through. I never thought that I would have this chance, but once again, God has blessed me. So thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and goodbye.
Thank you so much. You and Muhammad have been great guests this evening. We really appreciate you both.
Okay, thank you so much, both of you. Next week, we are going to be channeling both Winston Churchill and President Franklin Roosevelt in a roundtable discussion, and they are going to talk about how their decisions affected our modern world. What they did at the Yalta Conference, how they split up the world after World War II, had great implications. You can submit questions, suggestions for future guests through our email, channelinghistoryontparax@gmail.com. My 9th book, Messages of God for a Modern World, is currently available on Amazon, softcover, and Kindle. You can get signed editions of it on my website, barrystrohm.com. All of our shows are available on our YouTube channel. It's in my name, Barry Strohm. If you want to download them, you can go to podomatic.com and just simply search Channeling History. We have a new show on Voice America Variety Network. It's called Spirit Speak, Analyzing the Afterlife. Show can be heard live at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Please join us. We usually take live calls in the final segment. It's a good opportunity to ask us a question. So thank you for listening. Please join us Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the PowerX Radio Network.
And I would like to thank you all as well. We really appreciate you all, and we hope we're entertaining you and educating you at the same time. I want you to all have a wonderful week. God bless you all, and we'll catch up with you next week.
Thanks for listening to Channeling History. Tune in again next week for another electrifying episode, as we never know who will make an appearance or who will come through the portal. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2020. Our Story Begins by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.